I'm Coach Tarek.
And I'm Vanessa.
We are your movement experts, and we are here to educate health and fitness professionals with the tools to create real change for and within the industry.
Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of Purpose-Driven Movement. I am your host for today, Vanessa. Before we get into the episode, I wanted to take a little bit of time not only to introduce our incredible guest, but just to remind you of a few things. So if you're really loving us and you want to share it, we would be so happy if you did. So please follow us, like and share away. You can also reach out to us. So if you have a guest in mind or a topic in mind that you really, really want to hear about, find us on Instagram. You can find me on Instagram. Please just send us a DM. And we want to hear from you. We want to know what's making you tick, maybe what episodes you really loved, so we can help steer this in the right direction to keep you with us. Now that is done, I am really excited to talk about who I've interviewed for today. So our guest coming up is Jen Dugard. And if you haven't heard of her before, Jen is the founder of MumSafe, which is the creator of the Safe Return to Exercise. And she's an author of How to Love Your Body as Much as Your Baby. With 15 years experience, Jen's mission is to ensure all mums are looked after safely and effectively through ensuring trainers have a sound general knowledge in working with mums. Jen educates and mentors trainers and coaches across Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, and Taiwan. And Jen features regularly in the media and is now serving on the Oz Active board. With a pedigree like that, you know that she has a lot of worth to bring to you. And what I really love most about Jen is her passion for this subject in particular. She really fires me up. She really inspires me personally. And I know that you'll feel that from this conversation as well. The beautiful thing about it is how open she is and how important this topic is, not just for females. So if you're a male, please keep listening. This is so important for you to stay on board with us, because it needs to be education for everyone, not just education for females. So without further ado, here is Jen Dugard. Hi there, and welcome back to Purpose-Driven Movement podcast. I'm your host today, Vanessa, and with me I have the effervescent and the lovely Jen Dugard. Hey Jen, welcome.
Hey Vanessa, I'm so excited to be here.
We were just having a bit of a chat before we recorded, and Jen and I know each other. We've met several times, but we've known each other for a long time. I've known what Jen's done in the industry for a long time. And I thought it'd be really cool today to start our chat, Jen, with some mind-blowing statistics that you made me aware of literally just recently that have honestly really changed the way that I think about what you do in the industry. So please go into it, launch in. I'm really curious.
Yeah, I love that you started with this because it's taken me years to actually pull the numbers. So I'm so passionate about what I do, and I know that we need change. But sometimes, with all the passion in the world, does not break through in the way that numbers do. So I did have the help of my 14-year-old son to do some of the percentages in this, and I'll disclose exactly where they are. That's not my work because I can't do it. But what we need to know is that in 2020, around 4.35 million women in Australia were using gyms or fitness facilities. And that's in comparison to 3.5 million men. So let's just let that sink in for a second. There's already more women than men using our gyms and fitness facilities. Then there was a statistic from back in 2016 that told us that 77% of women over the age of 15 plus in Australia will become mothers. So hopefully way over the age of 15, but still after they're 15, 77% of all women will become a mum. Now, this is where I asked my 14-year-old for some help. He's very good at maths. So this means that 42.7% of a trainer's potential clientele will be a mum. So it's something like 3.34 million mothers in comparison to 3.5 million men are using our gyms and fitness facilities. So, when we start to think about the way that the industry has been geared up anyway, we've been taught, like Vanessa, you and I went through our fitness certificates years and years ago, and it was a body. It wasn't a woman's body. It was a body. And we know that that was a man's body. And now with more and more women and men using our fitness facilities and all the training, and that's not even taking into account outdoor, boot camps and things like that, or group fitness, which a lot of women are, really, really drawn to. We're just not, as trainers, given enough education to support the demographic that we're potentially going to get in front of as a trainer literally stepping out of their Cert 3 and 4.
Incredible. Like, that number blew my mind in such a good way, because like you said, I've been in the industry, I've been listening to what you do for literally years, and I saw that number and I was like, holy shit, like that's so huge. It's so massive. There's less women on my side of the story, not having children than there are having children. So there's such a big factor for us to look into. And I think in my Cert 3, Cert 4, we touched on it for perhaps like 20 minutes.
It's not changed. I've had, and I'm not going to name any names because I'm not that person. Like, I'm here, I don't want to shame people. What I want to do is elevate our industry. But what I can tell you is there's approximately 2 pages in the Cert 3 and 4, and the majority of pretty much every of the RTOs that I've spoken to try and go, hey, we need to do this different. But there's not enough seeming reason for anyone to really and truly change things at the moment. That's not to say we're not going to stop trying, and I'm not going to stop knocking on doors, but somebody at some point has to go. 42.7% of this 18-year-old male or female that's sitting in front of me, it's 42% of their potential clientele is going to be a mother. So we have to not necessarily teach them everything in their Cert 3 and 4, but we must move them from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence. That's all that needs to be done at the Cert 3 and 4 level. I'm actually not one of the educators that are saying we need to teach new grads or new students all about pre and postnatal in their Cert 3 and 4. It's not the place. They're not ready, and not everybody wants to specialize in that area. But we must say, like nutrition, like other specialities, like older adults, and I've got the stats on older adults and younger adults as well, and it's nowhere near the amount of mothers, yet they're seen as a special population inside of our Cert 3s and 4s, and we're taught what we can and can't do around nutrition. And all we need is that elevation of awareness to our personal trainers before they step into an everyday gym. And then we need the awareness of the big franchises and the big, people out there that are not catering for almost half of the people that are going through their doors.
I don't even know if we should classify it as a special population when it's literally...
Well, that's the thing. I go back, it's a mass special population, and this is what I proposed at Filex. I was like, maybe they're not a special population, but it's like when you look down to the definition of teaching, and I did that, and it's like they are a special population because they need special consideration, but there's so many of them that we need to make the awareness en masse.
You literally segued so perfectly for my next question. We're looking at pre-pregnancy, we're looking at post-pregnancy with all the work that you do. And a really nice way to wrap your head around it, I suppose, is to look at it all in stages, because that's kind of the way that it's done, right? So if you were to maybe give me some really brief pinpoints of important, like maybe just like a starting point for some trainers, or maybe even just some new fitness enthusiast mums who are listening out there. Let's have a look. Let's break it down in a couple of new stages, because for sure the needs are going to be nearly even completely different from pre to post, and then maybe even several years post. So should we start at like prenatal, we're in pregnancy, or maybe before pregnancy? What are your big considerations here?
I think if we're talking pre-pregnancy, we could get into helping women to build a really strong strength base is always going to be, and that's going to serve you throughout your whole, journey as a woman, whether you choose to become a mother or not. If we're talking again about pre-pregnancy, starting to help young women to understand their pelvic floor at an earlier age is really important. We just don't teach. Like, I was an ex-gymnast, and I honestly was never taught about the inner workings of my body as a gymnast. It's like, hold a handstand, do this, do that. And it's like, you're bracing from the outside and you're doing all these things. And it was only after I had babies that I went, wow, if I'd understood that as a 12-year-old gymnast, and there is the conversation of don't teach, people just need to move. So we want to allow our teenagers to move, our children to move. We don't want there to be, and I completely agree with that as well. But if we can start to help them to understand their body from the inside out earlier on, then potentially if they're doing any kind of elite sport, they can understand their body better. Add on to that the fact that we've got more and more young women exercising to a higher level than they've ever done before. So think about your CrossFitters, your powerlifters, yes, your gymnasts, like people, running marathons, all that kind of stuff sometimes comes later, the whole running thing. But, definitely your powerlifters, your CrossFitters, and you've got teenage girls presenting with leaking. Now, that's probably not to do with a loose, weak pelvic floor. And I'm really aware of my language, like weak and loose. I don't love it, but if someone's got better language, I'm working on it all the time. But in the context of what we're talking about, it makes sense. These women don't have lower toned, weak pelvic floors. They have hypertonic pelvic floors. So hypertonic meaning it's overactive, meaning that when they're lifting, their pelvic floor is so tight, it's not able to keep them continent. Or the amount of pressure that they're creating in intra-abdominally, so through their abdominal wall, down through their pelvic floor, is greater than the pelvic floor or the urethra's ability to help them stay continent. So if we can help, we shouldn't have young women that are leaking.
No.
At all. It shouldn't be passed off as normal as a CrossFitter to be leaking or a powerlifter or anything for that matter. And then if we take that further, Vanessa, we then start to move into these young women with hypertonic pelvic floors who then become pregnant. What does a pelvic floor need to do when you give birth vaginally?
It's got to relax, hopefully.
It's got to relax, exactly. So you've got this super fit young woman who's technically done everything right, who's not been taught about her pelvic floor, who then goes to try and give birth vaginally. And, there's no strict research around this. So I don't want to say if you have trained hard, you are going to have a hard delivery. Like I can't say any of that, but we can hypothesize that if your pelvic floor is so tight that you can't relax it, you're going to have a real hard time pushing a baby out, which then is potentially going to lead to birth trauma. Then it's going to lead to potentially pelvic floor issues down the track. And again, there's plenty of women that don't suffer these things. So we're not really, really aware that we're not here to scare people, but we really need to make sure that there's a better education throughout a woman's whole journey.
Yeah. I mean, I will just cut in briefly there because I have experienced this myself. So mine didn't come out as incontinence. Mine came out as pain, like hip, back, glute, sciatic pain, just general. And for years, it was just treated as hip pain. And when I did finally go see a pelvic floor specialist, my pelvic floor was so hypertonic that it took me a couple of goes with a real-time ultrasound trying to understand, number one, how to let go, and number two, actually how to correctly activate my pelvic floor. And mind you, I was probably just under 30, like I was probably late 20s. I have been exercising quite literally since I was 3 years old. I know how to engage muscles. I know how to turn things on. And I don't want to scare anyone out there, but there's a lot of fitness professionals out there who haven't experienced this for themselves and make from personal experience an internal pelvic floor release when you're in that much pain. Oh, it's not fun. And I feel like if I had have known a little bit about that earlier, if we had gotten us a little bit more education, that side of it is just, it's so easily taught as well, or it's so easily educated, and then they can go further to a pelvic floor specialist or to someone like that. But I was living with that for years before I even realized.
Did you, it's a bit of a personal question, so you don't have to expose yourself to the world, but did you also have like recurring UTIs?
Recurring UTIs, pain during sex, and it's just, you wonder what on earth is going on. And it's so frustrating. It's so frustrating because no one talks about it. And it's, people feel embarrassed by it and it's hard. That was the big step. I was with my long-term partner and I just kept getting these symptoms again and again and again. And it was just frustrating. So glad that I finally took the leap to go there. And it's honestly, it changed the way that I looked at female health in general.
Your story is it's not unusual, and it's really shit that young women can go from doctor to doctor to doctor with those symptoms. Maybe no one's ever pieced together the fact that you've got glute pain, lower back pain. Maybe you've got recurring UTIs and you just get put on what are they called? Antibiotics over and over again. But no one says, oh, do you have painful sex? Do you have any other pain? And it's not until you stumble on the right person at the right time that says, why don't we put all these symptoms together? And then why don't we get you to see a pelvic health or women's health physiotherapist? Because often they are the missing link in a lot of these conversations that we have. And again, like when we're talking about educating trainers, there's a lot of young trainers out there. And there's a lot of trainers that are asking more questions. So as much as we talk about what trainers don't know, trainers know a lot. And we have the capability to hold hold space in confidence. And we ask a lot of questions in our medical questionnaire. So we very much could be the first person that's like, oh, you have glute pain, you've got lower back pain, you experience leaking when you're training. Oh, do you have painful sex? And then that leads to a potential solution. So, you know, as much as I say we need to educate our trainers more, we also need to empower. Well, empowerment comes through education. And when we empower our trainers, there's so much potential to be that missing link for people, which is so exciting.
Yeah, 100%. It changes people's perceptions about themselves when they have those reoccurring problems. And like you can literally change their life if they're experiencing that level of pain and discomfort.
Well, we talked about pregnancy in terms of if you have a hypertonic pelvic floor in pregnancy, or you want to go see a pelvic floor physio by about 24 weeks, that means that you can make sure your pelvic floor is working well so you can contract and release, and they'll pick up on anything like having a hypertonic pelvic floor. So that could lead to, you know, I had a client years and years ago who'd had a C-section. It was an emergency C-section, couldn't push the baby out. Then she was around 18, 20 weeks pregnant, and she was telling me that she had glute pain on one side. And I was chatting to just general chit-chatting around, you know, do you think you might have another C-section? Like no judgment in the conversation, just are you going to, you know, go for a VBAC, like a vaginal delivery after having a C-section? And she just kind of didn't know for a while. So I suggested like she goes to see a pelvic health physio to get her pelvic floor checked. And what that resulted in was her glute pain being linked to a hypertonic pelvic floor on one side of her pelvic floor, which meant that she could then spend the next, 18, 20 weeks of her pregnancy working with a pelvic health physio to release that side and then have an educated conversation with her pelvic floor physio and her carer. Like that's my cue to get out of the conversation, to make sure they're having the conversation, but to get out of it because it's well out of my scope of practice. But she could then decide, like if she got to, 38 weeks, 36 weeks, and she still had a tight pelvic floor, she could then make the choice to go, you know what, I'm going to have another C-section because I know that having a vaginal delivery could be harder. Or she could go, you know what, I really want a vaginal delivery. I understand the consequences and I'm willing to give it a go because that's what I feel is right for me and right for my baby. And I've had other clients in that position, and I can think of one off the top of my head specifically who had a hypertonic pelvic floor when she went into a vaginal delivery. She had a really hard time and came out with tearing and assisted delivery and things like that. But the one thing that she said afterwards, she said, I was fully informed about my decision and I knew the risks. So no one could ever, she could never turn around and go, why did nobody tell me? And that's the biggest thing that we hear from early postpartum mums. Or even late down the track, like when we run courses and women are just like, oh my God, it all makes sense now. Why did nobody tell me? So in pregnancy, I would say that's one of the biggest things that we can help women to become aware of.
Knowledge is power because without it, you don't know what choices to make, or you're, like you said, you're unconsciously informed, like you're unconsciously ignorant. So you don't know what you don't know. And the more you can understand about your body, the more power you have to you. Let's go a little further, a little deeper. 0 to 6 weeks. New mum.
Yeah, it depends, right? So my question would be, has she had all of that prenatal, like in pregnancy care with a pelvic health physio? What is her background? What was the birth experience like? Because as much as we talk about all the things that can go wrong and to go, well, we want to prevent all of these things, had a really great conversation with the pelvic health physiotherapist that I've worked with for years. Her name's Jo Murdoch. She runs the physiotherapy clinic in Sydney and in a bunch of other places. And they'd done some prenatal course called Born Ready. So they help women to understand their bodies in readiness for having babies in a way that your normal prenatal care doesn't do it. So it teaches you about your pelvic floor and all that kind of stuff. And she said through doing that, she came into contact with more and more women that didn't present as broken and coming to see her after the fact. So I guess I want to talk about that because you could have someone that moves through this whole journey beautifully and they can return to the exercise that they love a lot earlier than somebody who maybe was pushing for a really long time, then had an emergency C-section, then had, struggled to connect with her baby, all that kind of thing. So I think the biggest thing is, and yes, we can go, okay, 0 to 6 weeks, go see a pelvic health physio. No matter what your journey was, understand your birth experience, because a lot of women also leave the hospital, especially if it didn't go the way that they imagined it would go, not really knowing what happened to them. And not knowing can lead to that sense of, real disconnection with your body, with your baby, with your relationship, could be a trigger for postpartum depression. So really making sure that whatever happened in that birth experience, they understand and they get the support that they need to move forward in the best way for them. So that would be the first, understand your birth experience, then go find a pelvic health physio, then go seek out a trainer. If this is a road you want to go down, a trainer that is experienced in working with pre and postnatal women. And first to 6 weeks, just fucking sleep, man. After you've done all the thinking about that, go to bed. If you can. And I say that with, again, you can't just go to bed, can you? Because you got a newborn.
At any opportunity, try to go to bed.
Just try and sleep and forget about everything else.
That's good advice. So this is, this is where I'm coming to the experts to ask for this specific advice.
Well, we've got all this. I'm like, yeah, do this, do that.
Yeah, because 0 to 6 weeks, there's not a whole lot of exercise going on. There's literally you're learning a brand new language, which is learn to your baby language, right? So we kind of leave them alone for that, birth 0 to 6 weeks as trainers, as coaches. So let's have a talk then about 6 weeks to 6 months.
So let's say from a trainer perspective, you have a woman who's 6 weeks postpartum walk into the gym. Now, the first thing to understand is that, yes, we need her to have had her 6-week checkup, but that 6-week checkup is, although it's the medical clearance, but essentially that 6-week checkup is the end of her medical care from the hospital or the GP or the obstetrician. We in the fitness industry have taken that, and for a long time the thought was, oh, well, she's had her 6-week checkup, she's fine to come back to the gym, we can do whatever we want. We need to understand that it's a line in the sand where she has, had all the normal, one of those words, postpartum checkups, and they've gone, you know what? You're progressing normally. You can go out into the world. If you want to start moving again, that's fine. What we need to understand as trainers is they don't get given a rehab or a return to exercise program. So had they had a ACL reconstruction, probably the process would be, okay, here's your 6-week sign-off or whatever it is. I suggest you go see this physio and get a rehabilitation plan. Sweet, sounds like common sense. Our postpartum mums are not getting that. So that's the first thing that as trainers, we need to understand. I feel like trainers are getting there, but I live in this bubble of the trainers that get it. And I also know there's a lot of trainers that are outside that bubble. Yep. So we as trainers need to understand that her 6-week checkup has cleared her to start to move, but it's definitely not a go back to what you were doing before you fell pregnant, because a lot of postpartum women you'll go, have you had you've figured out they've had a baby. Have you had a 6-week checkup? Do you feel okay? And they'll go, yeah. And they don't really know often what feels okay, what doesn't feel okay. If they're not used to being in tune with their body, often they don't know. If they are used to being in tune with their body, often they can shut stuff down. So there's plenty of stuff that happens internally and when the body's healing that we just don't know about. So if she's doing a pelvic floor exercise, the correct direction for an activation is a lift. 50 to 60% of women get that mixed up in their head. So if you've done your medical questionnaire with them, you've gone into, maybe not even doing pelvic floor activations because you've not really learned that yet, but you understand she needs to activate a pelvic floor, or she needs to brace or tense or do something like that, and you're cueing that in her training session, and she's pushing out instead of drawing up. She's actually putting pressure down on her pelvic floor instead of drawing it up. So again, as trainers, make sure you've got a pre-exercise questionnaire that is specific to working with mums. Even if you don't understand everything on it, use those questions as the triggers to send her for more care. So, I've asked questions about, do you have a heart condition? And then someone tells me, I'm like, I have no clue what that is. But what I need to know is that 1, you're being looked after. 2, I can get in contact with the person that's being looked at, that's looking after you if I need to. And 3, it's safe to move forward. So if a woman says to you, oh yeah, I had a forceps delivery, I was pushing for 3 hours and I had tearing, the question is not, do you feel okay? The question is, who's looking after you? What follow-up care have you had? And can I speak to them so I can make sure that you're being well looked after? Yeah, so making sure from a trainer perspective, when you've got that 6-week postpartum woman, or even the 1-year postpartum woman, because there's plenty of women that don't feel ready to exercise until 6 months or 12 months or even 2 years down the track. And sometimes it's even more important to ask them the questions, because if they're leaking while they're carrying the shopping or coughing or sneezing, because they are 2 or 3 years down the track, nobody is asking them. No one's having that conversation anymore.
The women who are seeing 6 months, a year, 2 years post-pregnancy haven't had a checkup and they don't know that they're potentially bearing down on their pelvic floor instead of drawing up, lifting and creating really good pelvic floor connection. Are those some of the side effects or aspects that can happen after, not knowing all of that?
Absolutely. So if you imagine that let's say a woman thinks she's doing her pelvic floor properly, so she thinks that she's drawing up, but she's actually pushing out. And then in the gym, we as trainers are working with her and she's relatively fit, relatively strong, say she feels okay, legs are strong, glutes are strong, all those kind of things. We then put her underneath a 40 kilo barbell, 50, 60, I don't know. And when she is getting to the bottom of that lift, or she's going through that hardest part of the lift, she is actually pushing out instead of pulling up. So you can only imagine over time that repetitively, if we put any strain on a muscle or connective tissue, ligaments, over time, they're going to weaken. So absolutely. And again, like I say throughout all of this stuff, that we have some research, we have not enough research. Sometimes research is not ethically viable. Like, can we get a woman to bear down through a 60 kilo squat over a long period of time to actually see what the result of that would be? I would say not. I don't think that's ethically okay. But we do, I got an email the other day from a trainer that I work with who she was out water skiing and her babies are like 4, I think. She's got 3 and she has fatigued her pelvic floor to the point at which she's ended up with a prolapse. And now that's not happened on that day. Like that day is the day that's happened to her, but that's a lead up of whatever's happened over the last few years to get to the point where she went out and did something that put her body under pressure. Same like if you get my ankle hurts when I run or my knee hurts when I run, and then eventually you do something. It's probably not happened on that day unless it's, a direct trauma. Often with our bodies, it's a build-up over time of some kind of imbalance or weakness or whatever it may be. And your pelvic floor is a muscle at the end of the day.
I really love your comparisons to injury or working with like an actual physiotherapist or another allied health professional, because it makes so much sense from a fitness space. And even, if you're not a trainer, you're listening to this conversation and you know that, my knee starts to get a little bit sore over time, or when I'm running, I think it's time to go see that physiotherapist. And then they have this rehabilitation plan. There's no rehabilitation plan for pregnancy. And because I suppose the pregnancy birthing experience can be so vastly different for so many women, there wouldn't be a one size fits all return to exercise. Is that correct?
There's no one size fits all, but there is, all of our bodies are made up of the same, like anatomically, obviously some exceptions here and there, but we are the same. Yeah. So we can preempt or give people enough education to go, understand this about your pelvic floor, understand this about your abdominal wall, understand this about the birth process, understand this about this. And then we can help you to figure out who you are as an individual and then recruit the services of the right person to put together an individualized recovery plan. And on that, but like I am not a one size fits all person. However, there's always going to be people that cannot access, afford specialized care. So that is when a mass program of education works and has to be better than nothing. It's like the work of the continents. Like, I'm not a believer that we as women have to do our pelvic floor exercises every day if we know our pelvic floor is working well. If I'm in the gym training, my pelvic floor is under load. So I don't need to sit there watching TV or drinking my coffee doing my pelvic floor exercises. But that message, mass message, raises the awareness of pelvic floor to every single woman across Australia, whether she or wherever, whether she can access further support or not. So there's a place for all of our messaging. We want to get our exercise professionals to be drilled into the more individualized part of the messaging and go, okay, cool, we've got that. We've got the mass message. Now, how do we tailor that to each individual? And if a woman is seeing us as a trainer, she can afford to see a pelvic health physio. She may have to not pay us for a week or two, but she can afford that next step.
Yeah, I love that answer. It's so good to hear that. And I think it's also, it makes you feel better as a trainer knowing that that information is there for you and you can prepare yourself for kind of any case scenario for someone coming into you, as long as you know where to guide them as well. That's really cool. Really, really cool. Now, this is really interesting. I recall as well a client who I had 11 years post-pregnancy. She had her kids a couple of years apart. And again, similar issue, pain in the hip, constant recurring pain in the hip, knee a little bit, sciatic back kind of pain as well here and there. And it turned out that she had had prolapse from her first and second pregnancy and was not able to connect to her pelvic floor correctly. And I'd been training her for maybe 8 months before we kind of put the dots together. It was 11 years postpartum. What would you say to mothers in that kind of, a couple of years post-pregnancy experiencing that kind of pain? Is it worth going back to a physio?
Yeah, so I'm going to answer your question in a second, but what's really important for people to understand is we talked about a knee pain, hip pain, like that kind of thing. Your pelvic floor, unless it can give you pain, we've talked about hypertonic pelvic floor, we've talked about painful sex, but it may be asymptomatic. Yeah, you may have a prolapse that you can't, and again, the definition of prolapse is changed over the years to say it's only a prolapse when it's symptomatic. Which for myself is problematic because we want to understand. And I understand if we're changing the language and a woman's not connecting to the fact that she has a prolapse, then it can be better for her from a not identifying with I have a prolapse. Having said that, I would want to know if I had a slight prolapse so that I could prevent that getting more down the track. In terms of answering your question specifically is I would recommend that every single postpartum woman sees a pelvic health physio. Ideally early postpartum, but if you're 2-3 years down the track, go now. If you've not understood your body from the inside out before, there's no harm in that at all. Best thing they're going to do is go, no, you're fine. Awesome. Keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah. And that's the message that you want to hear at the end of the day. And if you're getting back into exercise and you want to get back into exercise, there's always that, like, just go to be safe. And then that way your trainer, your coach, your facility is informed and you're informed about what you can and maybe should, restrict yourself from doing straight away.
Yeah, it's just adaptions, right? There's always a way to move.
This one is a little bit less pregnancy related or pre and postnatal related. We're talking about, prescribing exercise. We hear so many messages for mums about making sure you get in exercise. What does exercise mean to you in that context?
My definition of exercise has changed over the years. So I hate the word fit pro, but I don't know what you use instead, because I think exercise for a long time has been about fitness. And I think for me now, exercise is about movement. I've also been really, really judgmental in the past around the type of exercise people do. And whether it's worthwhile exercise or not worthwhile exercise. And again, I strength train by, that's my go-to. I'm not you thrive in the group fitness space. Catch me at the back with my feet in a tangle and I'm out the door. To be like a spin class is my worst nightmare. However, I think that exercise is I think we use the word movement. We need to move our bodies in ways that make us feel good. And you don't always feel good when you're working hard, but there's always a good feeling that comes whether it's during or after working hard. And then when we take it into the context of mums, move in a way that makes you feel good. So, and try and release any judgment of what you're doing versus what you used to be able to do versus what the person next to you is doing or your friends telling you that they're doing at 6 months postpartum. The main thing is finding something that you enjoy to do. Yeah, I think that's the main thing. Like rest when your body, again, let's stop pushing through the workouts when you're so tired. Like do the yoga session instead. Do the yin yoga session. Don't do the hard yoga. Pick up the lighter weights because you're not feeling it. Have a walk. Have a nap instead of training some days. You know, I would never say don't strength train to the majority of people if there's a way that they enjoy strength training. But yeah, like I was talking about it the other day with someone, and again, like not necessarily around group fitness, but other types of movement like Zumba. I love watching it. Could not go do it. But man, those people are loving life when they move. How good is it? Like, yeah. So movement. I think the key is movement, not exercise or fitness.
I think that's an excellent message in general, but particularly for our mums, soon-to-be mums, like older mums, all of the above. Awesome. I've got a couple more questions for you, Jen. So I've been to some pre- and postnatal courses. I've seen your talks. I know your businesses. I'm going to venture a guess and say that at least 80% of the people who come to you for education are females. Now, in our industry, I don't know if you've got stats on this, there's a lot of male trainers out there. I'm going to say it's probably roughly 50-50. There might be more females involved in group exercise, perhaps, as in trainers. But that means that there are definitely going to be a percentage of male trainers out there who are dealing with mums. What's your message to them to try, get them involved and get rid of the barriers? Like, what do you want to say to them?
There's so much in this. It's so funny because I've thought about doing like a campaign aimed at men, like to get men to come and do safe return. Like we get 1 or 2 men each course. Sometimes we don't, and it's all women. I get more men in Taiwan, which is interesting. The Taiwanese male trainers come as always a bigger percentage. I think that one of the biggest takeaways that we get, and for men that do the course, is I'm a man. Clearly, I've not had a baby. I'm not going to have a baby. Can I still do this work? And the message to them is the same as the message to women that haven't had babies. You do not have to have had a baby in order to work well with pre- and postnatal women. In fact, it's quite often you don't have your own journey, which your own journey is important or can be important, but you don't have this filter of what it was like for you, therefore what you think it should be like for other people. So, especially to our male trainers, you have to be willing to have conversations about vaginas, about pelvic floors, about boobs and sore boobs and leaky boobs and all. Well, no, you don't have to talk about leaky boobs, but you do need to be aware that boobs hurt after having babies and maybe don't lie on a front during exercise. But so long as you can have those conversations, then we need to make sure that you are well informed in order to look after the women that you're training. And if we think about female equality, and we're recording this on International Women's Day, which is very appropriate, but we need men to stand with women in order to create the change that we want to see in the world. So if we want to see that 42.7% of your clientele that are mothers being trained safely and effectively, we have to have the men and the boys, the boys on board with us. And not only that, men have pelvic floors. So there's plenty of stuff that you can take from the course into and relate to your own body and the body of the men that you're working with. There's men out there with incontinence. There's men out there that have had prostate surgery and they don't, there's so many things out there that cross over. So just come and play.
Amazing. Really good. Okay, last question. And this is a question that we ask all of our guests. If you could change one thing in the fitness health industry, instantly, no repercussions, what would you change?
Honestly, the fucked up way the industry has made, and I'm going to say people, but especially women, see their body. Yeah, and the image of fitness. Like you and I grew up in size 0 culture. For so long, we created this, whether it's a bodybuilding image, whether it's a teeny tiny skinny image of what, especially female. And I said people because I know that this has implications to men as well. I can only speak from a female perspective, but I'll talk from personal experience now, is I ended up with a borderline eating disorder after I got a personal trainer because of the way that I was told to monitor what I was putting into my mouth. And then the way that I got praised for reducing size, smaller skin fold measurements, all that kind of stuff. And it's taken I was praised the most when I was the most anxious and had lost the biggest amount of body fat because everything I ate just went straight through me. And there was part of me that went, this is really cool. Like, it was awful and a really shitty head to be in, but the body I was in was getting praised. And there's a real messed up way that we have created that outlook. And I do think it's changing. And as much as I think young women need to put clothes on when they get off the beach, I love the fact, when I'm like off the beach shopping and things like that, I love the fact that there's so much more body acceptance out there. I love the fact that there are young women in small clothes of all shapes and sizes. And we're really moving past, it's the smaller is better kind of culture. But I know that there's a lot of women and mothers especially of our age that are still struggling with their own body image because of how we were brought up. So if the fitness industry en masse could change anything, it would be, changing that preconception that a smaller body is a better body or a fitter body.
I love it. I love it. I love hearing the really interesting answers to that question. It's awesome. Where can we find information about you and about what you do?
Absolutely. So if you're a trainer that's listening, you can go to jendugard.com or find me on Instagram under the same name. And if you're a mum that's listening, you can go to mumsafe.com.au or find us on Instagram under the same name.
It's all going to be in the show notes, everybody. So you can just click onto the show notes and have a bit of a flick through. Make sure you do. It's vitally important information, as we both believe in. And Jen, thank you. Thank you so much for jumping on board and having a chat with me. I always love it.
Thank you. I appreciate being here. Thanks, Vanessa.
All right. We will get to listen to our next expert next week. Tune in, guys. Can't wait to have you there.
From the bottom of our hearts, thank you for being a part of our podcast community. If you haven't already, we would be honored if you would consider subscribing and following us on your favorite platform. That way, you'll never miss an episode and you'll be the first to know when new episodes are released. We truly appreciate your support and we can't wait to continue to grow and connect with you through our podcast.